now it's time for my Alibaba mid-20 teens aluminium mountain bike conversion to gravel bike for a first time who's never built a bike before legendary project. I'm going to learn some things, I'm going to mess some things up, and maybe, just maybe, you can learn something from my mistakes. First up, this carbon fork. Given the original was a boat anchor at like 3 kilos, I was really keen to slim things down. But there was a few factors to be careful of. Firstly, these are not a tapered fork, they're like consistent all the way through, and they're 30 mil, ending at 28 mil at the top. Most stuff that you can buy is tapered. Secondly, when you're using shocks, you have to basically guess the length of your fork using the compressed height, not the height that they actually are when nobody's riding on the bike, but when the height when they're squashed down from the weight of the rider, which is kind of hard to do. I went with 440 mil. It seems okay for me. It's definitely lower than it used to be, but I find the geometry fine. It's not ruined. Sorry, forums. Definitely take a photo of how your stack goes together before you assemble it. This took me like a million goes to get right, and as you can see, this is no small box of parts. I also needed a new cap extender and a spacer. That's a part I never actually knew existed up until this build. I thought they were just part of the fork, but yeah, that was more money right there. It goes inside the fork, the top tube, to make tension when you screw the top cap on. For the cranks, they're a screw fit type, so I went with a BSA bottom bracket. I don't know what BSA stands for, big, silly asshole. I went with 175mm cranks and a 38 tooth chainring. I don't really know what the point of crank length is, so I just went with a figure in the middle. I'm probably horribly wrong there, but they seem fine so far. The bottom bracket came with a bunch of spacers, I guess to accommodate for different bottom bracket sizes. I put them in, and I didn't, because I didn't know not to use them, but yeah, if it's all measured right, you don't need to use them. I actually had a problem where if I tightened the cranks too much, then the cranks wouldn't spin, and I didn't figure out that it was because I used spacers till a little bit later. The bottom bracket itself is fine. It doesn't make any noise or clicking or anything like that. Happy with it. It's plastic. I don't know if that's right or not, but it's plastic. I should also mention that the cranks are a SRAM type crank, which means they've got a little plastic adjuster on the left-hand side for tension and wobble. But that again is plastic and can thread quite easily, so don't over tighten, that sort of thing. I went with 400mm carbon flared style drop bars because I hate flat bars. There, I said it. They look stupid. So the Sensor SRX Pro group set was a super important part of this build. When I was doing the research, because I can't stress enough, I came from absolutely zero knowledge on this build. A lot of people were telling me the only way I could get this build was a SRAM Red or a GRX group set, which would have cost, well, as I've said, my budget was $1,000. I couldn't get even a group set for that much, so it was just out of the question. So without this group set being available for this price, this build wouldn't have happened. It's a SRAM style system, I guess, probably because that's who they copied. But basically, and less parts, right? So easier to copy. And in terms of installing, though, it was great and actually quite easy, way easier than I thought it would. Even though that the cable goes in at a funny angle, I was able to adjust it pretty easy, and it worked from the get-go, which was really nice. I did have to replace a broken derailleur hanger, which I didn't notice at first, so that was a little bit more money too. So this package group set that I got also came with these cable-operated hydraulic disc brakes. They're basically so you can have a cable and not have a whole hydraulic system with oil and pressure and all that sort of stuff, while still having disc brakes, but the oil is entirely contained within the caliper. They came with the package, so I thought great, but honestly, looking at them, I should have known that there might be problems, and it's yet another thing that you have to size. So once I added the discs and the calipers, I realized that they were the completely wrong size to stop this bike and they wouldn't fit. So yep, another month wait from AliExpress. That probably explains the reason my hairstyle changes during this video. So at this point, maybe the keen eyed amongst you have noticed something else, that the rear wheel is a 27.5, but the front is a 29er. That comes back to bite me later. But yeah, if you did notice that before, cheers for the heads up, guys. Having a different plate-sized rear cog is interesting. This is a 1x11 46-tooth cassette. It's about the size of a Domino's large. Cabling was easier than I thought it would be. I basically just bought some housing from eBay and installed them all using tag ties. The routing was fairly simple, even though the routing on a bike like this kind of creates some weird spirals and things everywhere, but that's the way it's supposed to be. I just use photos on the internet to compare, and it all works fine. yeah, what can I say? So at this point, I had a rideable bike, and I'm obviously reusing the saddle and reusing the old tires that came with the bike that are mismatched. But I was riding around and had a great time. So adding everything up, that came to a total of $1,073.50, which is a little bit over budget, I understand, but not by much. But then I realized that I'd sold the fork and the bars and the wrong calipers that I had to sell to get the new ones for $180. So I ended up with an actual end total of $890.50. What I did want to do is a little update on what kind of I think the final form is. And I've been running the bike for 6-7 months now, so it's been pretty stable. So I wanted to take you through what I've changed since that last filming. So you want to know something hilarious is that when I first bought the bike and had that initial setup, that was a 650B tire at the back, but at the front it was actually a 700. So I had to buy another 650B rim to attach these beautiful two-tone WTB fast rolling 47mm tires. As you can see, they're knobbly on the side and slick in the middle. Not as fast as say a 33 or 38, but pretty good. I've also attached these diagonal straps. I don't absolutely love these, but I wanted to be able to wear normal shoes and not carry extra shoes to the office because this is a commuter bike, and they work pretty well. And these are just some cheap eBay pedals. I've also been running it with a rear rack on these two mounting points. I'm going to be setting up my first bikepacking trip using this setup soon. And I've also shortened the stem. This is a long boy frame. Even though it's a large and is quite an upright bike, it was actually, I needed to have as short a stem as possible. So this is I want to say this is a 30mm stem compared to the 80mm that I had on it before. Makes it quite touchy on the steering, but it's quite nice to hold in the drops. You really get a lot of rotation and maneuver around tricky dog poos or small children, which is always important. And yeah, I've done several thousand Ks on it now, and all the brakes and everything held up pretty well, as you can see. No problems there. I would say the drivetrain isn't quite the lovely joy that I hoped. It does seem to need to be adjusted fairly often, even though it's quite fast in operation. It's definitely not as good as the 105 I've got on my other bike, so I'm not going to pretend it is. But I do quite like the one by, and only having one setup. I think that's great. I think it's enough. I maybe sometimes wish that I had a slightly smaller front cog, or even a larger, slightly smaller small cog, or a larger front cog, so that I can get slightly more drive in the flats. But it's enough. I'm not trying to be king of the mountain here. In case you're wondering how much it weighs, it's a little bit of a heavy boy. In spite of the aluminium frame, carbon fork, it's 12 kilos. So definitely even more heavy than my old steel frame road bike, but carrying a lot more tire. So yeah, it's not going to be my friend in the uphills, but it's got grip. Yeah, that's just a sort of final update on where the build ended up, and I guess the next test will be to see how it goes under strain on our first bikepacking, which will be my next bike video, which should be fun. Till then.